I'm going to put everything into rebuilding every one of these communities.
I won't tolerate one piece of criticism of the ADF from what I've seen.
There are some 2,000 Defence Force personnel right now currently deployed. This number will increase to some 5,000 over the next few days.
Our leaders tell us the cavalry is coming. For some, that claim sounds like a cruel joke.
We're just heading up into the hills to 3 different communities that are still cut off. There's about 500 people that live up there, we're told. We don't know how far we're going to get because so many of the roads have been cut off by landslides.
15 kilometres north of Lismore, at a place called the Channon, locals have commandeered the community hall to deliver the things our government can't seem to: relief and recovery.
So what we've done is identified the slips, we've identified the hazards that are up on the road, and then we've individually identified every member of that household.
The red dots are locations for food drops. Robin and her mates came together to fight gas fracking projects years ago. Now they're field marshals, project managers and lifesavers.
What happens on a catastrophe of this scale is that a rural area goes dark, and the reason they've gone dark is because they're in serious trouble.
After 9 days of fending for themselves in these isolated communities, today, 2 soldiers. Whenever the army does properly get here, they'll find the locals have achieved quite a bit already.
They've built this incredible system of flying foxes, ropes and pulleys up through the flooded valley. There's this main rope here and then a second rope, which is what they use to pull that boat back and forth. And that's how they ferry the supplies across, medical essentials, food, to the people on the other side who've been cut off for the last week or so.
We were expecting Army to do some food drops. However, we just sort of gave up on that and, locals just binded together and we got the food drops out.
Guanji is attempting to clean up a landslip at his house. The torrent of water dislodged his neighbour's front yard and dumped it on his driveway, leaving the house precariously perched.
My biggest concern is that those 2 people, residents, are actually going to be in the actual house when it kind of comes down.
The response here has all been delivered without something most of us assume we'd have in an emergency.
The number one thing is the mobile phone, the next is the mobile phone, and the next thing is the mobile phone.
These tiny communities may be under pressure and under-supported, but this moment is binding them together, leading them to solutions and helping them survive.
Hamish joins us now from Woodburn, which is yet another town that's been cut off for more than a week. Hamish, some of that stuff, it's just extraordinary to see what communities are doing by themselves. Is this just a couple of communities doing this, or is it bigger than that?
It's not just a couple of communities. I think the scale and the spread of this, Waleed, is what surprised me, and it's maybe part of why government and authorities are just overwhelmed at the moment. That story was from about 15, 20 k's north of Lismore this morning. We're now about 40 minutes south of Lismore. Woodburn, this part of the town, only really opened up, became accessible within the last 24 hours. Take a look at this. People still can't get into their homes down there because the water's still there. If you swing around here, you can see the top of a shed. There was a boat and a caravan in that, and that shape at the top, the bubbling, that's where the boat was pushed up by the force of the water into the roof of that shed. If you come around here as well, you can see some people still using boats just to get to the front of their house. And the sound you can hear, that's the soundtrack you hear right across this region. That's people using gurneys just to try and get some of the mud out. I know the politicians clearly get it at the moment. They're saying, we're sorry, we know we need to do more. But if you are here on the ground, you can see just how much has not been done, how much has not been touched by government, by the military. And, if you're in those towns, those tiny little villages where they've done so much on their own, and 2 blokes from the army turn up with a tape measure, you can imagine how that might feel 9 days on.
So have you encountered much anger?
I've got to say, it's not particularly anger, Carrie. That is another striking factor here. A lot of those really remote communities, they're a little bit off-grid. A lot of those people that are doing the recovery effort, they've come together, as I said, around things like anti-fracking movements or other protests or even dealing with bushfires. There's, plenty of hippies up in some of those hills as well. They're quite proud about that. And so some of them say, well, look, we've never really relied on government that much, so they're not that shocked that they haven't come in this moment. But I do think that it stands out that 9 days into this crisis, for everything that's been said, you're still finding places that just have not been reached.
Such incredibly resourceful communities, Hamish. Thanks so much for your time.
Nate, so good to have you with us in this context. This all raises the question of what's going to get hit next, how this plays out over the next week or so. What do you reckon you can
It's really
forecast?
incredible seeing the effects that weather actually has on the ground. And unfortunately, there's some bad news on the way, relatively speaking, for that area for the northeast of New South Wales. There's another burst of thunderstorm activity coming through tomorrow, actually. So, and largely thanks to what's happening right now further south in New South Wales, some southerly winds are starting to push that really humid air further up the coastline. So we're looking at the potential for more severe thunderstorms, another 20, 30 millimetres for some. Not the huge totals by any means. So we're not talking about massive flooding returning, but any rainfall right now. I mean, you saw how much water was there, right? It's ready to respond instantly. The ground is soaking and it just slows down that recovery.
So you mean in those same areas, or do you mean new areas are going to get hit?
Well, so it's for the northeast of New South Wales generally. This kind of thunderstorm activity is really hit and miss. So
Right.
I can't say Woodburn is definitely getting it again. There's a decent signal through there, and also southeastern Queensland, which was also affected. So it's just a bit of a downside. But then beyond that, it should be some clearer skies and we get a bit of a dry air mass moving over the area.
So.